Hani, it is so good to have you with us. And Hani, you've recently been appointed as International Director of Langham Literature, and we look forward to hearing about a lot of that. But good to have you with us. Whereabouts are you speaking from?
Hello, everybody. Thanks, John, for the welcoming. And I'm speaking from Egypt, from Cairo. This is where I'm based.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And have you lived there for a while, dare I say?
Yes, I lived most of my life in Egypt.
Mhm.
First half of my life in Minya, which is 3 hours driving south of Cairo.
Mhm.
And then most of the rest of my life, I lived in Cairo,
Mhm.
uh, except just for the parts of my life that I lived in the West, in the United States or in the UK.
Uh-huh. And for all of us, we divide our lives into a life before Langham and a life after Langham. And so tell us a bit about before Langham and how you came into contact with Langham and how you're in this particular role.
Well, okay. Well, my relationship with Langham goes back a long way because I'm a Langham Scholar.
Mm.
So during my doctoral studies, which I did in the United States, I was supported by Langham. So many meaningful relationships as well developed, and not just for the financial support, but also friendships on the U.S. side mainly because I did my doctoral work in the United States, but also on the British side.
Mm.
And elsewhere as well. So this is like the earliest point of contact with Langham. So it goes back to 2004 in
Mhm.
that sense. Um, but since then, my relationship with Langham was multi-dimensional because I served as a theology professor for a very long time in my life, ending up being the president of the seminary in Egypt, in Cairo, ETSC, the Evangelical Theological Seminary in Cairo. And during this role, there was a lot of partnerships and collaboration between the seminary and Langham, which
Mm.
supported so many of our faculty at ETSC and still is. There are so many in the pipeline being supported by Langham.
Mhm.
And then finally, through the literature program as the director, a role that I started playing last July,
Mhm.
so almost a year now.
Almost a year. Yeah.
So
So
that's
what is your role for folk? I mean, you're international director of the literature program, but describe a little bit about what that role embraces.
the literature director.
Mm.
Well, okay, it's I lead a big team that involves administrative staff located in the UK, in Carlisle, as you all know.
Mhm.
But also, the half of the team are dispersed all around the world. They work in different capacities with academic, especially academic profiles as commissioning editors, for example. Literature, as you know, I've heard that, everybody knows what Langham does, so I don't want to talk too much about this. But literature has three legs. The literature program has three legs. One of them is the publishing leg, and the second one is publisher development, and the third one is distribution of books to theological libraries around the world in majority world contexts, serving theological seminaries, libraries. So those are the three legs. The publishing one focuses on publishing books mainly in English, in French, and Spanish, but also translating some of these works into other languages, local languages, like, for example, Urdu, which is one of our recent publications that have been worked on for a long time, finally got published a couple of months ago.
Mhm.
So publishing mainly in English and French and then Spanish. That's mainly the role of the publishing leg of literature. Publisher development has to do with supporting local publishers so that they can do the job in a better way, so that they can support the church and the Christian communities where they live. Coming alongside these publishers, helping them not only with money, but also with, encouraging them and walking the way with them. The third one is pretty straightforward, providing library grants to seminaries so that they can build their, acquisitions and get a better opportunity, getting exposed to more literature that supports research for the different programs that they offer at the seminary. So this is...
And I mean, can you give us some idea of the scale of that? I mean, I know that I think it's around 50 books each year that are being published, which is quite a significant operation, particularly in terms of global church, but it's a significant publishing operation in its own right. But what about the library grants program? What kind of scale does that operate under? Can you share?
It's about, I would say, about 150, maybe more libraries that Langham supports. They give library grants. Well, now it's about 150 sterlings per school. And we help the schools by providing catalogs that they can pick from. And it's not only the Langham books that they can pick from, but also major publications by other Christian publishers. We facilitate bringing these books to their, to their hands. And we offer them about 150 sterling worth of books per each library, and Langham ships these books for free. So it's actually a very burdensome task and operation because in certain majority world contexts, it's really hard to bring something from outside the country, and it could get lost, it could get damaged, it could get, taxes could be astronomically ridiculous, so it's, yeah.
As you look at the Langham catalogue or the operation that you serve and develop, is there a particular area of great interest to you or excitement to you at this instant in time as you look on these three different strands and you look at all these books and you say, where's your heart? Where's your interest? Is there a particular area there?
Yes, I can share about that. Well, first, in terms of area and majority world context, Middle East would be, lies at the heart because I live there, and there's a big need. There's a big need. Libraries here are destitute. So for not only for the publishing side of the publishing leg of Langham, but the publisher development actually is a pretty key role to help publishers develop in a way that makes sense to the church at this point of time. So Middle East would be one area as a geographical area. Theological libraries really need a lot of work here, both in English mainly, but also in local languages. So that'll be one thing. The second thing is public theology. That would be an academic area, not a geographical area. So public theology. Well, right now, I mean, theology as traditionally considered is not enough. We need more than that, and we need more focus on that because of the life situations that majority world context engage. But here I'm focusing on majority world context, but this also applies to the Western world in a different way. But it's especially true about majority. We have critical situations that need to be addressed by the church with a prophetic voice, which needs theological reflection in connection with culture.
Can
So
you
theological
give us a very current one on that you're reflecting on?
Yeah, of course. I mean, theopolitics or political theology, for example, that would be one
Mm,
area. There's a lot of conflict in this region, but also beyond. So in the Middle East, but also in Europe, Eastern Europe, especially,
mhm,
what's going on there. And public theology is a main approach that I think we need to
mhm,
more, focus on more. So
mm,
issues of reconciliation, issues of justice as grounded biblically
mhm,
and theologically in a way that could be a prophetic voice for the church to address these things in different ways. There's no one way to address these things,
mhm,
but there must be focus on these issues
mm. We've
because
we've got as you will know, a general election about to happen here in a month or so's time. So I haven't heard much theological reflection as that engagement takes place. But we do live in hope and pray for that. But we can sense in your region that's critical. Yeah.
yeah, well, also interestingly, there is a rise of an atheistic movement in the Middle East, for example, which is for me it's very surprising for a region that has always been um, known for religiosity.
Hmm.
The people are naturally religious and they still hang on to religion. But 20 years ago, this movement started rising, and after the Arab Spring, uh, it's became more explicit, and many people actually converted to atheism from religious backgrounds for different reasons. And it is becoming a challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity. And we can talk about this for a very long time. But it's a challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity. And things need to be worked out in this area. It still connects theology with culture. It's still a sort of public theology from a different angle between theology and philosophy, and questions about atheism and stuff like that. So those would be, in my opinion, three areas. Of course, also, I mean, poverty,
Hmm.
and this is a subsection of political theology, but it's also like a major area that needs to be addressed. So reconciliation, poverty, atheism, social justice,
Hmm.
um, those will be areas, and and
Um,
and and they are very common actually among majority world contexts.
Well,
It-
in our own context here, I mean, in the UK, I mean, I think the sort of atheism has dissolved a little bit into a more urbane secular humanism, but it's certainly there, and certainly there's less and less religiosity is experience, background here. So it'd be interesting to hear those reflections. I think I just wonder whether there's any particular area of books on any of those themes or different themes that actually underpin our catalogue that sell well or in great demand globally. The reason why I mention that is I'll get beaten up after the call if by Simon if I don't say that we've got our books for Bible College sponsorship out at the moment. I know several on this call have already committed to helping provide books for Bible colleges. It's just be interesting whether you have a top-down view as to what colleges are buying, whether there's any particular, um, and we have one of our leading authors on the call, of course, and I just wonder, do you have a sense as to whether there's particular topics or area?
well, many libraries and many schools buy our books, and actually, in a recent statistics that was developed by Excellence in Giving,
Hmm.
United States. And we learned, which is very encouraging, that actually schools like to pick from books that fit their contexts better than receiving a large number of books without actually having a say to what kind of books they are bringing in. And in that sense, it's very encouraging. And And yeah, our books are being asked for by title. Right now, I can't remember exact statistics about certain schools, but this kind of statistics we received, and the report is available if need be, be
Yeah.
shared.
No, well, thanks for pointing out to people that this is not researched and rehearsed ad infinitum before we have the conversation,
Oh
but this
no! Oh
is there for
no!
people
Oh no!
to
No
pick
no!
up and follow.
Oh,
Brilliant.
there's a book actually that's written in Arabic for atheism, addressing the issue of atheism. It's a
Mm,
local book that's right now is being translated into English to be published by Langham.
mm,
It was published by a local publisher in Lebanon that is supported by a Langham funds,
mhm.
and now it's being translated in order to be published in English by Langham Publishing.
That
So
sounds
that's
interesting.
one way of, because Langham is pretty much engaged in a contextual theology. That's what we're all about. I mean, it's
Mm,
contextual theology, addressing the needs in a way that makes sense to the different contexts.
mm,
Another book is you just came out by two Ukrainian scholars, Victoria
yeah,
and Valeria. Its title is Better Than One. Better Than One. It's about loneliness.
mm,
It's a biblical and theological perspective on loneliness uh, from the context of war.
mm,
And it's really, really an amazing book, and I actually recommend it. If
mhm.
you, it gives an access to what's going on in Ukraine, but from a theological perspective that addresses a human question that everybody asks. So it's a wonderful contextual book that I'm recommending. If you ask me
Right.
to the book,
Well, I shall,
if you
for
want,
one, will look out for it. I love browsing the dust jackets, so to speak, in the backs of the books that we have in the warehouse and see what's going on. Hani, I mean, all that's good and exciting, and it's a privilege to eavesdrop on your role there. I wonder, just thinking that, people will have prayer topics in the chat box before we move on in a few moments' time. I wonder whether there's a problem area or issue or anything on that side of the equation that you'd like to share before we go into prayer. It's great news to hear the exciting movement and what's happening, but are there sort of things of concern or problems that you can share to such a committed audience?
yes, thanks, John. Of course there are. We're human, so we're limited, and so there are regular challenges, everyday challenges. Like for example, I mean the amount of work is big, and we need to be strengthened by your prayer. So
Mhm.
please remember us as you pray. There's a lot of books that need to be worked on, and so we need support through prayer. There are new publishers that we need to take on board. So for example, there is one in Ethiopia, and it's one of the neediest areas for local publishing that could make sense to the church and serve the church in a better way. And it's really hard to find someone who really has the vision and passionate about it. And that person has just been identified, and we are praying and working that this could come to fruition. So we need to, this needs a lot of prayer. This is very encouraging, but at the same time, it needs a lot of support to get it off the ground. And so that will be one. There is a very important project that we hope to finish and complete by the end of this year. It's a revision of the African Bible commentary, which has been very influential. The
Mhm.
first version has been very, very influential. A very large, I think about 250,000 copies were sold. And now this is the revision of it, and it's at the final stage. But at the same time, the burden of the work is getting heavier on the authors, on the editors. At the same time, there are challenges like health challenges. So many people got sick, and actually in a very strange way, family issues and stuff like that. So we feel like there is some sort of opposition or resistance, whatever to call it. So we need prayer so that this work could be pulled off until the end, because it's really great and people like it and people order it, and it's making difference. So that would be one thing. I mentioned these things in brief in the list of prayer I sent, but those would be highlights that I would like to share with you. What else?
And we've got
Definitely, there are people who are working in a very terrible circumstances that are on our team, and those are those who are working. For example, in Ukraine, we have a small team in Ukraine based, and they're really suffering. And the same with in Palestine. These two areas are very crucial. Those represents two of our major majority world contexts that we're working with. And the long time that has passed sometimes give people the feeling that we got used to it, but people there are suffering every day in new ways. So Palestinians, after the problems that are happening over there, Ukrainians are, feel like, the eyes of the world are turning away from them as if the problem was ended, but it has not, and they're suffering greatly every day, and this puts a lot of pressure on our team who live in these areas. So we really appreciate your prayer.